Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the service and sacrifice of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the Australian Defence Force as part of the Memorial's NAIDOC Week activities. We acknowledge the original custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Ngunnawal people, and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today, who are watching the live stream. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Flight Lieutenant Grace Casey Morn. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party, present, arms!
If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's first World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Sylvester Sullivan. Sylvester Sullivan was born on the 24th of October 1883 in Trengi, New South Wales, the 11th child of James and Catherine Sullivan. Catherine, known as Kitty, was the daughter of an Aboriginal woman, also known as Kitty. The area around Trengi was originally inhabited by the Wangai people. While some European inhabitants came with the establishment of the cattle station known as Wee Marbar, It wasn't until the arrival of the railway in the 1880s that Trangie, allegedly named after the local word for quick, came into being. The Sullivans are still remembered as a significant part of the history of Trangie, and Sylvester was believed to have lived there from the time of his birth until he turned 24. Sylvester attended school at Gin Gin. He and his brothers also played cricket for Gin Gin and Trangie. Like his brothers, he worked as a shearer and a stockman on the neighbouring properties. In 1909, he married Alice French in Dubbo, and the following year, a child named Vincent was born to the couple. By 1913, Sylvester Sullivan was working as a groom and living in Bowen Park near Gin Gin in Queensland, while his wife remained in Trangie. The following year, a warrant was issued for his arrest for failure to support his wife. By 1914, Sullivan was back in Trangie, and on the 11th of December, he was part of a large group of men from the town who attempted to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force. While the Defence Act specifically exempted those not of substantial European descent from service, many army recruiters chose to ignore this rule. For them, a potential soldier was a potential soldier, regardless of the colour of his skin. Because of the potential difficulties in enlisting, many Indigenous recruits made multiple attempts, travelling to other recruiting offices if they were at first rejected. Some tried 4 or 5 times before succeeding. Over 1,000 Indigenous soldiers served in the Australian Imperial Force during the First World War, around 147 of whom made the ultimate sacrifice. We now know of at least 70 Aboriginal men who served on Gallipoli, 13 of whom were killed in action. These men had many reasons for enlisting. As well as the allure of travel and adventure, soldiers could send money home to their families. In the AIF, everyone was paid the same, and the pay was good. In February 1916, another warrant was issued for Sullivan's arrest for failure to support his wife, who was now around 6 months pregnant. Notes appeared in the Police Gazette that he had been recently seen in Sydney and may attempt to enlist. In fact, he had already successfully enlisted. On the 25th of January 1916, Sullivan successfully enlisted at Liverpool near Sydney, giving his name as Samuel Brown and claiming to be a labourer from Dubbo. He was earmarked for the Australian Camel Corps, a camel-mounted infantry brigade that had been raised in 1916 to deal with the revolt of pro-Turkish Sensai tribesmen in Egypt's western desert. As Sullivan went into camp and began training, the pressures of military discipline began to cause problems. He was first found absent without leave in March. In May, Alice Sullivan gave birth to a son, Elder Clement Sylvester Sullivan. In June, Sullivan was again charged for being absent without leave. In September, Sylvester admitted that he had enlisted under a false name. After signing a statutory declaration, he was allotted a new service number and again became Sylvester Sullivan. Shortly afterwards, he was again charged with being absent without leave. In early October, he was absent without leave for a 4-day stretch. And on the 21st of October, he was absent without leave until his arrest 26 days later. Sylvester was taken to the Garrison Hospital and lodged in the guard room pending his escort to Darlinghurst. During this period, Alice Sullivan wrote to Lieutenant Wiseman, who had charge of Sylvester while he was training for the Camel Corps, and asked, "Will you please let me know why I have received such a small sum this pay? I have made an agreement with the police not to have my husband arrested if I am sent the correct sum each pay. If he does not think he can allot me so much, please let me know. I am very disappointed today, as I had such a lot to do with the money if it had been sent to me." By the afternoon of the 19th of November, Sullivan had had enough. After taking money from the headquarters office, he stole a black Speedwell bicycle with broken brakes and deserted from Menangle Park. Rather than this being the end of Sullivan's involvement with the AIF, and on the 6th of December 1917, he again enlisted for service, this time in Albury, claiming to be Darcy Wills, a groom from Lockhart in New South Wales. and giving his wife's name as Mary Wills. On the 28th of February, Private Wills left Melbourne aboard the troop ship Nestor with reinforcements for the 4th Battalion. Arriving in England in April, he joined a training battalion at Sutton Veny, and on the 17th of July proceeded to France, joining the 4th Battalion in France on the 23rd. In August, the battalion was in the Amiens area, where it was to take part in the final Allied offensive of the war, the 100 Days Offensive, which was launched on the 8th of August 1918. The initial attack broke through German lines, sowing panic and confusion. The collapse in German morale led General Erich Ludendorff to dub it the Black Day of the German Army. As the Allies continued the advance, the Germans were forced back to the Hindenburg Line, and the fighting continued as the advance pushed forward. In the pre-dawn dark of the 23rd of August 1918, the 4th Battalion prepared to make a dawn attack, with the 5th and 1st Battalions on their right and left respectively. Positions were taken before 4 o'clock, and shortly before 5 the assault began. By this late stage of the war, the organisation was detailed and comprehensive. The battalion cooperated with a group of 6 tanks, and there was planned coordination with French trench mortars and Vickers machine guns. Ground flares would signal to aeroplanes to counter-attack and drop ammunition. Despite meticulous planning, a demoralised enemy, and the success of the attack, casualties were almost inevitable. Among the dead was 34-year-old Sylvester Sullivan, still wearing the ID tag that identified him as Private Darcy Wills. Unsurprisingly, no trace of Darcy Wills' next of kin could be found by military authorities. In November 1923, Alice Sullivan wrote to military authorities to inquire about her husband's war medals and identified Darcy Wills as the alias of Sylvester Sullivan. An investigation began, and after interviews with Sylvester's parents, the police sergeant of Trangie, and a veteran who had known him as both Sullivan and Wills, in 1925 it was concluded that Samuel Brown, Darcy Wills, and Sylvester Sullivan were all the one and same person. Today, Sylvester Sullivan's remains lie in Heath Cemetery in France. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. An image of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Sylvester Sullivan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Helpful party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Helpful party, present, arms.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party in words. Turn. Catapult party, quick march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.